Fractured Soul, Daughter of Sea and Sky, Book 1, written by AR Colbert, narrated by Jennifer Groberg. Part 2, The Seer. Chapter 16. It had been over a week since our discovery of the tablet, over a week of pretending nothing was wrong and that my entire world hadn't been turned on its head in just a short matter of hours. Tate hadn't made another appearance, but Sean had, and he was making good on his promise to help me find my mom. We were going to see his seer after breakfast. Sean had somehow talked his mom and Millie into an end-of-summer trip that would put us right in this seer girl's neighborhood. He was still doubtful too much would come of it, but I couldn't be more excited. Sitting around Millie's townhouse and just waiting for something to happen was useless. I was ready to take action. It took some effort to keep myself occupied until it was time to leave. I swirled my spoon around the inside of a pretty turquoise bowl, exploring the unknown objects floating in my oatmeal. It smelled delicious, like cinnamon and brown sugar, but there were other things. "Pierre," I called out to my Aunt Millie's private chef, who stood at the stove on the opposite side of the giant white marble kitchen island. "What is it?" he asked in a thick French accent. "That's what I want to know." He turned with a frown, rubbing his hands on the white tea towel he held. "There's something in my oatmeal." "Oui, spices and sugar and nuts." I scooped out a particularly globby offender, and it fell off my spoon onto the countertop. "What's that one?" His frown deepened. "It's a raisin." "Oh, do you always put raisins in oatmeal? And why is it yellow?" "It's not yellow, it's golden." I didn't think anyone actually ate golden raisins. They're kind of Jeeves, my aunt's driver, tisked from his bar stool beside me. "Careful, don't anger Pierre or he might put worse things than golden raisins in your food." He took a showy, giant spoonful of his own bowl, trying to smile as he chewed a bite and gave the chef a thumbs up. I snorted at his attempt. It was hard to force a smile while chewing a golden raisin. "You're right. My apologies to the chef. The oatmeal is delicious. Speaking of chefs, Pierre," I said with a flourish and a terrible imitation of a French accent, "what is your real name?" The chef put his hands on his hips. "What do you mean?" He looked at Jeeves, who was still trying to swallow his bite. "What is she talking about?" "Like Jeeves here," I gestured next to me with my thumb. "His real name is Brian, but he wanted something quirky and funny to go by. You know, like a stereotypical butler." Jeeves's eyes widened, and he shook his head quickly as I spoke. "And you?" I stuttered over my words as understanding dawned on me. You are lucky enough to have the perfect name for a French chef without changing anything at all." Jeeves nodded emphatically. The doorbell rang, mercifully saving me from putting my foot any further in my mouth. "I'll get it," Jeeves said, hopping to his feet. I turned my eyes back toward my breakfast until he returned a few moments later with Sean and his mother Claudia. "We made it," Claudia chimed with bright eyes and a smile. "I figured we could take my car since our bags are already in the trunk. Does that work for you? Where's your aunt?" "Works for me." I passed a nearly empty bowl across the counter to Pierre. All that remained were a few raisins. He shook his head and carried my dish to the sink. I turned back to Claudia, tilting my head at the sound of heels clicking down the wooden stairs around the corner in the foyer. "Sounds like she's coming now." Millie entered the kitchen, sighing loudly, with her cell phone wedged to her ear with her shoulder as she stirred creamer into a coffee mug. "I understand," she said to someone on the other end. "Yes, of course. No, don't worry about it at all. I've got it covered. I hope he gets well soon. Okay, bye-bye." "Morning. Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she said with a sad smile. "But I have some bad news. It looks like I'm going to have to skip our trip." "Why?" Claudia asked. "Should we just reschedule? No, I said a little too forcefully. I mean, Sean and I will be preparing for school next weekend. This is probably our last chance to go before classes start. The truth was that my patience was gone. I was tired of doing nothing to find my mother. She had disappeared several days ago, and I was apparently the only one still concerned about it. Everyone insisted that she was an adult and should be fine. Claudia even had the nerve to suggest that she was on vacation, celebrating my going off to college. It was insulting. But after our experience at the gallery, Sean was on my side. He knew something bigger was going on, which was why he'd arranged this trip to Millie's house in the Hamptons. Even if his seer couldn't find my mom, I hoped one of his other friends up there may be a little more adept with the ancient languages. We still had no idea what the clay tablet said. "Everly is right," Millie said. She took a long swig of her coffee and set the mug on the counter. "You all should go. You don't need me there." "What is so important that you would miss a weekend at the beach?" Claudia asked. "It's Abby." Millie slid up onto a bar stool and Sean rushed to her side. "What about Abby?" he asked. His tone was a little too urgent, and it drew the eyes of everyone in the room. "Who's Abby?" I asked with a grin. Sean hadn't mentioned any lady friends. With all the time we'd spent together over the last week, I thought surely he'd have brought up a girlfriend. "She's an employee down at the shop. Her father has been ill off and on a bit lately, and she just called to say that he's having a particularly rough week. She asked if she could take the weekend off to look after him." "I'm so sorry to hear that. Does she need any help?" Sean asked. "I'm sure she'll be just fine." I tried to make my words sound firm. I wasn't going to let him back out for some crush. I needed him to introduce me to his seer friend. Jeeves raised his brows at me, obviously interpreting my irritation for something else. I shook my head softly. "Ew, Jeeves. Sean is totally not my type." "Well, I don't want to go without you," Claudia said. "I'm no teenager anymore. I can't keep up with these two." She waved her hand at Sean and me. "Bring a book. That way they can still squeeze in a vacation before school, and you can be there to chaperone." Claudia gasped and put a hand to her chest. "Chaperone? I'm not some third wheel. Besides, they're adults. Let them go on without us." I perked up in my seat. Getting Claudia off my back while I researched the tablet and sought answers about my mom was even better than our original plan. "Yeah, Millie, we'll be totally fine. I promise." Jeeves smirked at me. Dang it, this isn't about getting alone with Sean. I wanted to nudge him in the ribs, but I was too intent on convincing Millie to let us go to pay him any more attention. "Well, I suppose I don't mind if you two use my house. Just promise me there won't be any wild parties. Hildy next door gets grumpy with even the slightest uptick in volume." I crossed my heart. "Promise, no noise. Hildy won't even know we're there. Hey, Hildy in the Hamptons kind of sounds like a reality show, huh?" I turned with a giant grin to Sean, but he didn't return it. In fact, he looked quite distraught. Millie picked up on it, too. "Abby will be fine," she said with a wink. "I'll swing by and check on her after I close up tonight." That seemed to appease him. He nodded. "Okay, you sure you don't want to come with us, Mom?" "I'm sure," Claudia said. "You two have fun, but not too much fun. We'll see you in a few days." Jeeves walked to the foyer to load my bag and unload Claudia's as we said our goodbyes. I thanked my aunt again and turned to follow Sean outside. "Oh, hang on." I stopped outside the door. "I forgot my vitamins. I'll be right back." I dashed back inside and up the stairs to my room. My mom was pretty laid back about most things, but she had always been an absolute dictator when it came to taking my vitamins, and it was one of the last things she'd said in the gallery before leaving with Russell. It might have seemed silly to anyone else, but I wanted to smile when I saw her again and let her know I hadn't stopped, even while she was away. I picked up the giant amber-colored bottle and turned it around in my hands. There was no label. My mom special ordered them for me, and I realized I wouldn't be able to get more without her. I was down to about a quarter of the bottle remaining, about 2 weeks' worth of vitamins. It was just one more painful reminder that she was still missing. See, Mom, you've got to come back so you can get me some more. Shoving the bottle into my purse, I bounded back down the stairs, shouting goodbye again to Jeeves and my aunt as I ran past the kitchen. Sean was already buckled up in the driver's seat of a shiny white Range Rover. I eagerly jumped into the passenger seat beside him. Whew! I clapped my hands. Let's do this! Chapter 17. It took longer than I expected to get out of the city, but before long Sean was able to quit cursing at the traffic and roll down the windows. He seemed to relax a bit as we neared the coast. I turned down the indie rock music he had blasting from the speakers, hoping to chat now that he seemed more at ease. So, Abby. I lifted my brows up and down playfully. He cut his eyes over sideways at me, then turned back to the road. I gave him a minute to respond, but it was clear he wasn't interested in offering up any more information than was necessary. Who is she? I asked after a beat. She works for your aunt. I gathered that, I grinned. But who is she to you? Your aunt's employee. He looked over at me again, not even attempting to hide his irritation. I'd learned that Sean wasn't a very open person. He was a pretty flat, cut-to-the-chase kind of guy. If Millie hadn't pushed us together, we probably wouldn't have clicked much as friends at all. But as it stood, we'd been forced to spend our afternoons together. Once my aunt heard about Tate following me around, Sean was charged with acting as my bodyguard. It was a job neither he nor I was particularly excited about, but Millie insisted. Until we knew for sure whether I had any powers or not, Sean was to stay by my side any time I left Millie's house. Claudia wasn't very excited about it either. She might have been my aunt's best friend, but that didn't mean she agreed with Millie's approach to keeping my existence under wraps. She wanted to bring me to her husband so he could present me in front of the Atlantean Council and see if they could determine my true genetics. But knowing that could implicate my mother with the crime of engaging in a relationship with a mortal, Millie resisted, hard. So I was left bumbling around New York with Sean until hopefully I gained some powers of my own, and hopefully they were strong enough to prove that I had a pure Atlantean soul. Otherwise, Tate would be quick to do away with me. I hadn't seen him again since the night we nabbed the tablet from the gallery, but I'd felt him. It sounded strange to admit out loud, but every so often while I was out walking the dogs or joining my aunt for lunch, I'd get that familiar tingle of energy running up my spine. It was like my nerves would just come alive. I never saw Tate, but I knew he was watching me. So, I said, turning my attention back to a very grumpy-looking Sean in the driver's seat, if Abby works with Millie, does that mean she's Atlantean too? No. Is she a Garthian or Olympian? She's human, he frowned, and I'm done talking about her. Okay, got it. Sheesh. Evidently I'd hit on a sore spot with him, and it only made me all that much more excited to meet Abby in person when we got back. If Sean was letting a mortal get to him that much, there must have been something special about her. Let's change topics then. Tell me about your friends we're going to see. I never said they were my friends. I know Gayla through our parents. Her dad is on the Olympian Council, so our fathers do business together. We would run around as kids while they met during the annual convention. And Gayla is the seer you told me about? Supposedly. Supposedly? What does that mean? You don't know for sure? Sean huffed. I haven't seen her in a few years. Once we were old enough to stay home alone, we quit tagging along with our parents to the conventions each year, but I heard she got some visionary powers. I pinched my thumb and forefinger on the bridge of my nose. You mean we're coming all this way and weekending together on the off chance that you might run into a girl you knew when you were a little boy? And maybe she has powers that could possibly help me if she remembers you and has any desire to work with your mortal friend? Do you have a better idea? No. I crossed my arms over my chest and pouted, staring out the window. As we drove along, the houses grew larger and more spread apart. They were massive, giant mansions, sprawled out across the sandy earth, overlooking a deep blue sea. It was basically the antithesis of the scenery I grew up with. Before long, the salty air and balmy wind blowing in from the water eased my sour mood. I'd been under the impression that Sean's plan was a sure thing, but whether this Gala remembered him or not, she was our best shot at finding my mom. Sean slowed his vehicle and turned down a quiet road near the bay. We pulled into a long drive that led to a comparably modest white estate with an expansive lush green lawn spread out before a charming home with walls of windows. "Here we are," Sean said. He turned the engine off and hopped out. The sunshine warmed my cheeks as I joined him. "This place is stunning." I shielded my eyes with a hand to get a better view of the house and yard. Millie must be one well-connected drug dealer. I was still snickering at my joke when I noticed an elderly woman with an oversized straw hat scowling at me from the opposite side of a thick green hedge. I waved, and she furrowed her brows. "Hello, Hildy," Sean called out. The woman shook her head and continued clipping the bushes that marked the property lines between Millie's house and hers. Boy, I was on a roll with saying the wrong thing at the wrong time today. Sean grabbed our bags from the trunk of the car, and I followed him up the sidewalk to Millie's gorgeous vacation home. "Are all Atlanteans rich, or just my aunt?" "We live for 1,000 years, Sean said, as he entered and flipped on the lights. "That's a long time to amass wealth." "Compounding interest is a beautiful thing." I ran across a living room to drool over the aqua-colored water of the pool out back, and for the first time I really wondered what could have been so bad to make my mother turn away from the luxuries of the keeper's lifestyle. Was she really a criminal? I turned back to Sean, who was searching the fridge for something to drink. "Does your friend Gala live near here?" "Not exactly." "Do you have her number?" "No." I groaned. "Come on now, give me something." "Most of the younger keepers hang out at a sports bar in East Hampton, when they're not at the beach, anyway." "Great, let's go." "Right now?" Sean looked disappointed. "Yes, now. Were you wanting to take a swim first? Kick up your feet for a bit?" He looked longingly at the pool. "Sean!" I smacked his arm. "We're not here for fun. We're here for business." "All right." He picked up his keys and downed the rest of his water bottle in 3 gulps before crushing it in his fist. "But remember, I make no promises that she'll be there, and there's no telling who else we might find." "You mean Tate?" Chill bumps shot up my arm just at the mention of his name. "No, Thaddeus doesn't ever venture out this far from the city, but he's not the only Agarthian hunter." "That's okay. He's the only one assigned to me, right? The others would have no reason to believe I'm anything but immortal. I'm harmless." Sean shrugged. "If you say so. Let's go." Chapter 18. The streets of East Hampton looked like they were taken directly from the pages of a magazine. Quaint shops filled with cheerful patrons lined the road, which was dotted with simple parks and outdoor seating areas, begging me to join in on the fun. "I love this place," I sighed. "I wish my mom could see it." "I'm sure she's seen it. This is where the annual convention used to be held each year. Just because she ditched this world when you were born doesn't mean she never took part in it before. In fact, Mom said she was very involved. She was one of Maxwell's favorite messengers." "Who's Maxwell? And why was he so enamored with my mother?" He's the current leader of the Atlanteans. Like your king? We don't call him our king. We're not Olympians, for goodness sake. But yeah, he's a monarch of sorts. A powerful Atlantean who was quite taken by my mother. Could he be a candidate for my father? So my mom was one of the king's favorites, huh? Do you know exactly how close they were? No, I wasn't alive then. But don't get any bright ideas. He's bonded with Gloriana, and they have 2 pure Atlantean children. He glanced over in time to catch my frown. Okay, so I wasn't a princess, but I wasn't sad that I asked. One of these days, I might just come across someone who fit the description. My dad had to be out there somewhere. Here we are. Sean parallel parked on a side road off the main street. Most of the businesses were back behind us, and all I saw ahead was a dusty line of windows across a strip of abandoned commercial spaces. A brown owl sat perched on the corner of the roof, peering at us through inquisitive yellow eyes. This is the sports bar? Yep. Sean climbed out of the vehicle. The horn sounded as he locked the doors, making me jump. It's called the Keep. I chuckled. That's a bit on the nose, isn't it? He shrugged. I guess it's kind of an inside joke. No one out here knows what it means except the people who matter. Are you saying humans don't matter? Maybe for a short time, but their lives are over so fast they don't get the chance to matter for long. I followed him to the glass doors of the abandoned space. I could see through the window that the place was empty, but Sean pulled open the door and stepped inside anyway. He strode to the back wall, where a painted door blended in perfectly with the neutral beige walls. This way. He tugged on the knob and I gasped as the scene on the other side unfolded. The lights were down low, the room illuminated by neon signs along the walls, advertising various brands of beer and liquor that I'd never heard of. 2 pool tables sat in the middle of the room, with low-hanging stained glass light fixtures hovering over the green felt surfaces. A shiny lacquered high-top bar stretched across one wall, and beside it, double doors sat propped open to an outdoor courtyard, hidden entirely from the streets by the brick walls of the building. A few guys sat propped up at the bar, and a couple of tables held small groups of people, but it looked as though most of the crowd was outside. I followed Sean across the floor toward the courtyard, never drawing so much as a curious glance from anyone inside. Outside was a courtyard half the size of the room we'd left. A green awning covered the space from above, casting an emerald glow across the patio. A hot tub sat in the middle of it all, and it was here where the crowd was centered. 4 or 5 girls sat perched along the edges of the tub, laughing and talking with animated expressions. They could have all been supermodels, with long, lean bodies, scantily clad in bikinis and sarongs, lush locks of hair flowing past their shoulders, and million-watt smiles. A group of guys played cornhole near an exposed brick wall, and other young adults stood coupled or paired up at tables and small seating areas throughout the rest of the space. There she is. Sean pointed to the hot tub. Of course she's one of the models. Which one? She's the one in purple. I followed his gaze to a gorgeous girl with long, thick platinum-colored hair and warm, striking dark eyes. She seemed to be at the center of attention in the hot tub, telling some story that had the other girls enthralled. I glanced down at my denim shorts, suddenly feeling very self-conscious among these beautiful people. Go ahead, Sean said. You're not coming with me? I need you to introduce us. Nah, I'm good. He shoved his hands into the pockets of his shorts, looking like he would be just fine waiting for hours. Sean? A chipper, slightly raspy voice called out from behind me. Is that you? I turned over my shoulder and saw the stunning blonde grinning big enough to show off every single straight white tooth in her mouth. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. She slid up onto the side of the tub and swung 2 unfairly long legs over the edge. With a bounce to her step, she hurried over to where we stood and threw both arms around Sean's neck, leaving him with 2 wet spots on his shirt when she pulled away. His cheeks flushed, and I had to stifle my laugh. "I haven't seen you in ages. How have you been?" "I've been good, Gayla. How about you?" "Just dandy." She turned to me. "Who is your friend?" "Everly Gordon," I said, extending a hand. She brushed past it and hugged me. This time Sean got to laugh as my eyes widened in surprise. "I'm Gayla. It's so nice to meet you." She turned back to Sean and whispered something in his ear. "No, she's not human. She's Atlantean. Millie Gordon's niece. She just hasn't gotten her powers yet." He shot me a look that said to play along. Sweet Sean, even if he believed I was fractured, I appreciated him pretending as though I was one of them. It was much easier that way, though I'd have to explain everything to Gayla at some point if she was going to help me find my mom. I looked around the patio. We'd drawn the attention of a few others now, and they made their way slowly over to where we were standing. Gayla introduced me to a couple of the guys who had been playing cornhole and a friend from the hot tub, another pale-haired girl named Dominique, or Dom for short. The fair-haired friend studied me through narrowed eyes, suspicion twisting her mouth. I felt very exposed under the scrutiny of her stare, as though she somehow knew more than she was letting on. "Sit down," Gayla said, motioning toward a table on the side. "It's been too long. Let's get some drinks and catch up." Gayla sat beside Sean, which put me and suspicious Dom together opposite them as the guys got back to their game. "So I hear you got the finesse genes," Gayla said with a grin. "Yep." Sean ducked his chin just a smidge, embarrassed but trying to hide it. "Faster, stronger, and better reflexes." "Just like your dad," she said. Sean nodded. "Have you been assigned a role yet? Guardian? Warrior?" "Not yet." He cut his eyes over to me briefly, but I knew his role of bodyguard for me wasn't an official role for the Keepers. "I'd love either one, though, as long as they don't put me in leadership like my dad." "I hear you," Gayla sighed. "Oh, sorry, I forgot. You're a seer, right?" "Apparently," she shrugged. "Though I don't seem to be a very good one. Even so, the only role for me will be in leadership." She scrunched her nose, trying to show distaste for her future, but honestly, she just looked adorable. She was too pretty for any expression to actually look ugly, and I loved how uncomfortable it made Sean to look at her. He totally had a crush on her, and I couldn't wait to rub it in later. "What's your power?" Dom cut in suddenly. Her dark brown eyes were focused hard on me. "She hasn't gotten it yet," Gayla answered for me. She seemed to believe Sean that I would eventually get one. That was good, because I absolutely did not want to lay out the messy backstory of my mother's potential mortal love interest there in the courtyard. And I had no idea if any of the Keepers standing around may have been hunters like Tate. No, I couldn't reveal the truth about myself here. I couldn't reveal it at all until I was certain I could trust Gayla to keep my secret. Dom said. "Well, I'm a telepath. Know what that means?" I pinched my lips together, unable to respond. I knew what I thought that meant, and it wasn't good in this situation. "It means I can read your thoughts." I bit my tongue, knowing full well it wouldn't hide the colorful word that just flashed through my mind. Dom smirked. She knew everything. Chapter 19. I kicked Sean under the table, hoping he'd wipe the obvious look of shock from his face. He was totally going to give us away. "Oh, hey," he said, glancing at his watch. "I didn't realize how late it was. We've got to get going." I nodded gently, trying to play it cool. Dom hadn't peeled her eyes away from me yet, but I didn't have any intentions of explaining myself here. "Oh no," Gayla frowned. Already? Well, what are you guys doing later tonight? Sean looked at me, asking permission with his eyes. I shrugged. I wasn't opposed to hanging out tonight. We just needed to regroup first. We hadn't anticipated running into a mind reader, so I wanted to get control of my thoughts and be sure I understood the keeper laws, enough to not get my mom into trouble. And I needed to know that Dom wouldn't rat me out to Tate or anyone else who might want my fractured soul. We don't have anything planned yet. What's up? Daddy's throwing a little end of summer party on the boat. You guys should totally come out. You can meet all the other Olympian weirdos like us. Gayla winked at me. I wished I were a weirdo like them. Being mortal sounded completely lame now that I knew there were alternatives. I glanced sideways at Dom, who continued to stare at me without any discernible expression on her face. Sounds fun. Gayla clapped. Yay! It's been way too long since the last time we got into trouble. She leaned into Sean, whose cheeks reddened at her touch. We'll catch up later then. Sean stood, signaling it was time for us to leave. Dom watched me join his side, and I mentally repeated, clear mind, clear mind, clear mind, so quickly she probably thought I was insane. But at least she wasn't going to get any more information out of me. Not right then, anyway. With the patio behind us, I searched the dark bar for the door. We were merely steps away from the freedom of setting my mind loose again. I quickened my pace toward the exit, but Sean paused behind me at the sound of someone calling out his name. Dude, you too good to say hi? I turned to find a handsome guy with dark skin and alluring ocean-colored eyes grinning at Sean. He held his hands out to the side, ready to greet his friend. Sean didn't disappoint. Devon! He laughed as they exchanged some kind of dude handshake backclap thing. Over their shoulders, I saw Dom's thin silhouette in the shadows of the courtyard, silently watching us. Sean... I approached the guys and tapped him on the shoulder. Right, he said. Sorry, Devon, this is Everly. She just moved here for school. Everly, this is Devon. He's one of my good friends from my childhood. That's great. Nice to meet you. I tried to stay pleasant, but I was starting to panic. I didn't need an introduction to Sean's friend. I just wanted to get out of there. Why couldn't Dom mind her own business? What did she want with me? I glanced back at her cold stare. She was almost smirking now. I'm gonna go wait outside. I cut Sean a sharp look, urging him to join me, but he seemed oblivious to my rising anxiety. Yeah, okay. I'll catch up here in a sec. Frustrated, I turned and left Sean with Devon. I needed to get out of there. I burst through both sets of doors, dashing through the empty storefront and back out onto the sunny sidewalk. It was only then that I could breathe again. With one last look over my shoulder to be sure I wasn't followed, I turned back to the car. It was locked. I propped myself up against it for just a minute, watching the horned owl on the roof swivel its ancient-looking head back and forth. Its yellow eyes landed on me, and I swore I saw some intelligence there, enough that I had to pull my eyes away. It was making me uncomfortable. Come on, Sean, hurry up. My patience was nearing rock bottom, and the empty street wasn't doing anything for my nerves. With a nod goodbye to the owl, I decided to make my way back to the main road and see what the shops of East Hampton had to offer. Maybe I'd find a cute dress to wear to Gayla's party while Sean was busy gabbing with his buddy. Small crowds moved up and down the street with carefree ease, blissfully unaware of the beings that lurked just around the corner. Part of me wished I were still ignorant as well. My biggest worry would still be picking a major as I laughed with my mother. Life was grand before we were thrown into the world of the keepers. But there was no going back now, only forward, and with any luck, my situation would improve. I had to hold out hope that Mom had a good reason for hiding my lineage. I had to pray that it had nothing to do with broken laws and fractured souls. I had to believe that she was not a criminal and that I would not be hunted to my death. Phew, no biggie. I slowly came up behind a couple of young mothers. One pushed a stroller with 2 grinning toddlers, twins by the looks of it. The other had a baby strapped to her chest. They strolled slowly enough that I was able to look around and take in the sights of the street. Adorable storefronts lined both sides, quaint cottage-like boutiques interspersed with high-dollar major brands. I paused to get a closer look at a little shop across the street. A cute purple dress in the window caught my eye. It was a little more adventurous than anything I might have worn back home, but when in New York... I hurried over to the crosswalk, patiently waiting for my signal to go. A shiny black BMW pulled up to the intersection, and as soon as it passed, I'd be clear to cross to the other side. But the vehicle slowed. Squeak! A small rubber giraffe hit me in the back of the calf with a squeal. I turned to pick it up and return it to the chubby hand of a twin in the stroller. "I'm so sorry," his mother said. "I'll take it. If you give it back, he'll just throw it again." The child whimpered as I changed course and handed his toy to his mother instead. Then I turned back to the street and noticed the BMW was still sitting there in the intersection. "Come on, buddy, the light's green." I looked through the windshield to get the driver's attention and gasped when I saw that his attention was already on me. He wore dark sunglasses that hid his eyes, but there was no mistaking the man in the car. His white topknot sat perched high on the crown of his head, and his thin arms draped casually over the leather-wrapped steering wheel. "Russell," I whispered. The rest of his car was empty, no sign of my mother, but I wouldn't give up that easily. I ran forward to bang on his window and see what he could tell me about the day she disappeared. He was the last person I saw her with. But as soon as I took one step forward, the engine of Russell's car roared, and he surged forward through a now yellow light. I cursed under my breath as his red taillights disappeared down the road, sending pedestrians scurrying out of his way as he flew past them. The dress would have to wait. I sprinted back the way I'd come, desperate to get back to Sean. We had to follow Russell and find my mom. Chapter 20. "So, are we going to make a plan or what?" Sean leaned against the doorframe of the master bathroom in Millie's vacation home. He was kind enough to give me the big room, and my cosmetics were strewn across her granite countertops. "No," I grumbled as I applied a final coat of mascara to my lashes. "There's nothing to plan. Just keep your thoughts quiet so you don't get me killed. Dom is way too eager to dig around in my mind. I'm sure she'll be happy to root around in your stupid brain, too." "Hey," Sean crossed his arms. "My brain is not stupid. It takes offense to your name-calling." I rolled my eyes and immediately felt guilty for it. Sean had spent the afternoon trying to make me laugh after he refused to engage in the high-speed car chase I'd begged him for. "He's long gone," Sean had said when I got back to the keep. "I wouldn't even know where to begin looking for him." I zipped up my makeup bag and threw it on the counter, still frustrated. He was right, of course. Russell was out of sight long before I got back to Sean's Range Rover. But I was so mad. He was right there in front of me, and I let him get away. I sighed and turned around to face Sean. "Sorry, Brain, I'm just frustrated. I almost had him." But that was okay. We were on to Plan B, Gayla's party. I spun to show off the dress I'd found in the back of Millie's closet. "Do I look like a rich immortal?" It wasn't as trendy as a purple number I'd spotted in the boutique downtown, but it definitely had that unique Millie flair. "Close enough," Sean said. "Are you ready?" "Almost." I swallowed down a couple of vitamins just in case we got back late, then swished some mouthwash. "All right, let's do this." I tried to relax and stop taking my frustration out on Sean. I admitted he was right, and we made a plan on our car ride down to the marina. Gayla would have to know the full truth, possible mortality and all, if there was any hope of finding my mom. As a seer, there was a good chance she'd discover the truth anyway, but she would be a lot more successful trying to elicit a vision if she had as much information beforehand as possible. And as for Dom... "Can we trust her?" I asked, as he pulled into the parking lot. Sean shrugged. "I never really knew her. She didn't start coming around until we were older. But if she's a telepath, then she already saw everything you were thinking. So if the council is waiting on the dock to take you in for questioning, we'll have our answer. Otherwise, I guess we just have to wait and see if she can keep a secret." "You don't actually think she'd do that, do you?" "I don't know what to think when it comes to you. None of this is normal." He turned off the engine and hopped out of the vehicle. With a final deep breath, I followed him. We walked across a parking lot to the docks. Luxurious boats lined up in rows, bobbing gently in the water. They looked alive with twinkling lights, and the sound of laughter rang out from behind us. The whole marina was buzzing with excitement. I spotted a particularly large yacht ahead on the right. There was a crowd of 10 or 12 gathered on the deck, and lights through the windows of the cabin told me there were more inside. But I didn't see Gayla. In fact, the passengers all looked to be in their 50s or 60s. I slowed as we reached the dock that led to the giant boat. "What are you doing?" Sean asked. I gestured to my side. "Is this not where we're going?" He laughed. No." I looked around. This was the biggest personal boat on the water. We'd nearly reached the end of the marina, and all that lay in front of us were commercial ships. "Where is it?" He pointed ahead. "It's that one." My jaw dropped. "The cruise ship?" "It's not a cruise ship," he laughed again. "That's Gayla's boat. They call it Scylla." I paused. "As in Scylla and Charybdis?" A week ago, the mention of monsters from Greek mythology wouldn't have bothered me at all, but I didn't know what was real anymore. Sean grew serious. "You know about that?" "I read about it once." I tapped on my temple. "Photographic memory. I don't forget things. Is that what they named the boat after?" He frowned. "It's a she, and she has a lot of ears. You better hope Scylla doesn't hear you talking about her that way." "Are you messing with me?" He remained stoic. "Sean, if there is a 6-headed monster on that ship—" He couldn't hold in his laughter anymore. He threw his head back and let out loud guffaws before bending over in half. I crossed my arms, waiting for him to finish. Finally, he stood tall again, red-faced and still grinning. "Your expression was priceless." He wiped his eye. "Oh man, I wish I had a picture." I was not amused. "Okay, now where's the boat, for real this time?" He was still chuckling a little as he responded. "That's really it, and it's really called Scylla. But don't worry, she doesn't exist anymore. At least the sea monster doesn't. The boat does, obviously." I took another look at the ship. I never would have guessed anyone could own a boat like that. It stood 3 stories tall on the water, emitting a blue glow across the gentle waves lapping up at its sides. White lights surrounded the entrance to the ship's private dock and lined the edges leading up to the massive vessel. On board, there must have been a couple of 100 people spread across the various decks. A large pool faded from purple to blue to green and back again in waves of light. This was wealth that I'd never imagined. I felt wildly out of place. "Come on." He grabbed my wrist and pulled me along. "Let's go find Gayla and see what we can get figured out." I stumbled along after him. People stood in pairs along the dock, chatting in their beautiful attire like they didn't have a care in the world. We ducked around them, making our way all the way to the entrance, when I noticed the platinum blonde hair of the girl checking in each guest. "Please don't be..." "Dom." I forced a smile as she looked up from the list in her hands. She tilted her head slightly before focusing on Sean. "You can go in, Sean. Gayla's expecting you, but..." She squared her shoulders as she turned to me. I'm afraid we can't allow any mortals aboard tonight. She sucked air through her teeth as though she was sorry she had to let me down. Gayla invited both of us, Sean protested. Everly hasn't gotten her powers yet, but she's not mortal. Dom narrowed her eyes at me. That's not what she thinks. Ugh, apparently I was the one with the stupid traitorous brain. My eyes widened, and I thought of my mother before I could stop myself. I didn't want her to get in trouble just because I had a passing thought of being mortal. Dom tilted her head again, thoroughly examining me. Where is she? Who? Your mother. I cringed, but then the pain of reality hit me. I don't know, I admitted. She continued to study me with those dark brown eyes, and I couldn't bear to maintain eye contact. I looked over her shoulder to the deck of the boat, just in time to see a flash of white hair disappear inside. Russell! What? Dom asked. Where? Sean stepped forward, pushing Dom to the side. Her telepathy was nothing for his strength. There, I pointed. He just stepped inside. Well, what are you waiting for? Let's go. Chapter 21. I ran past a startled Dom with Sean hot on my heels. I reached the door and pushed through with too much force, tripping over my own feet and nearly knocking over Sean, who had been trailing way too closely in the process. But it didn't matter. I saw a snowy white head of hair pulled back into an elegant low ponytail rather than his signature man bun. Russell, stop! The man acted as though he couldn't hear me. He continued moving deeper into the crowd, his suit blending in with others just like it, and I pushed through the mass of strangers to reach him. Finally, I was close enough to reach out and wrap my hand around his arm. Hey! I shouted sternly. He turned around, mouth agape. Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. I dropped my hand and warmth climbed up into my cheeks. It wasn't Russell. The man turned away with a scowl, and I wished I was anywhere else. Thankfully, no one else seemed to notice or care much about what just happened. I glanced at Sean with a shrug. I really thought it was him. What are the odds of running into two different men with long white hair like that on the same day? They're Olympians, Everly. So? Look around. Sean pulled me to the side and gestured throughout the room. Blondes everywhere. About 3/4 of the guests had some shade of blonde hair. Many were platinum, and I noticed more than a handful were bordering on pure white hair, like Russell and the man I'd just accosted. Is that an Olympian thing, then? They all have blonde or white hair? Most of them, yeah. There are no hard and fast rules, but generally they'll have fair hair and skin with dark eyes. That described Russell all right. So are there standard traits among Atlanteans too? And Agarthians? Sean sighed. I still can't get over how little you know about your heritage. Atlanteans have blue or green eyes, like the sea, but no specific hair color. We vary from gingers like me to yellow blonde, all the way to deep brunettes. But Atlantean eyes are never brown? Our eyes are never brown. Got it. I swallowed the lump in my throat and looked away, ashamed of my own eyes. The more I discovered about Atlanteans, the less convinced I became that I might be of pure Atlantean blood. At first glance, I did have the signature blue eyes of my ancestors, but apparently some brown-eyed mortal tainted me with a slice of darkness in my left eye. It was just one more check in the reasons Tate wants to kill me column. And the Agarthians are a little trickier. They are typically darker in their natural form, with skin that ranges from a golden sun-kissed bronze all the way to a deep dark umber. Their eyes are golden, like you saw with Tate. But here's the kicker. All Agarthians possess the power to change their appearance. All of them? Sean nodded. Is that the only power they possess? No, it's just kind of a standard thing for their race. Like we can breathe underwater, and the Olympians don't require oxygen at all." "What?" He sucked air through his teeth. "You can't breathe underwater?" "No." "Don't worry." He tried to lighten his expression, but it was obvious that even Sean was beginning to lose faith that I was like him. "It'll come with your powers." "Right, my powers." I frowned. It was looking more and more like these mythical powers would never come, and at this point I almost hoped they wouldn't. Tate wouldn't kill me if I had a pure mortal soul, only if I was fractured. Being mortal would mean bad news for my mom, though. "Let's find Gayla." I straightened my shoulders, finding new determination. If I wasn't going to get my powers after all, then the least I could do was locate my mom and help her hide from the council. I couldn't hold my mortal blood against her, but the council would be much less forgiving. "All right," Sean agreed. "I bet she's upstairs." I followed him through extravagantly decorated rooms, full of beautiful people. Leaning against the bar in a sleek game room beyond the area where we'd entered the interior of the boat, I spotted 3 familiar faces. They were the same faces plastered across every gossip magazine and every grocery store checkout line across the country. The Miles brothers, celebrity playboys known for the trail of A-list actresses they left crying in their wake. They were gorgeous, impossibly handsome. I wasn't the kind of girl to get starstruck, but even I couldn't help but slow my pace as we passed the perfect male specimens. "Keep it moving," Sean grumbled. "Are they?" "Agarthian. Half of the people you see on television and in the movies are. With their ever-changing looks and their glamour, it's easy for Agarthians to become famous. You'll also find them in pro sports and politics. They're supposed to use their influence to help keep the humans' behavior in check, but I don't see the difference in what they're doing now versus what our people did in ancient Greece, personally. They think they're gods." Sean was clearly harboring some hard feelings, but it explained a lot. I surveyed the room again with my new understanding, pausing on the classical pianist tickling the ivories in the corner. His music was absolutely enchanting. Glamorous, you might say. "So, are there many Agarthians here?" "Yes, several." I inched my way closer and leaned in towards his ear. "Any hunters?" "Unlikely. Only keepers are invited to Mr. Swain's parties. Hunters wouldn't serve any purpose here. Also, once they are assigned a case, they stick with it until completion. Thaddeus has been assigned to you, which means no one else will come after you, so you can relax tonight." Easy for him to say. I couldn't help but keep my eyes scanning every new room we entered. I even thought I felt a familiar buzzing sensation once, but it was a false alarm. "So what about Atlanteans?" I asked. Sean had just pushed the 3 on the inside of an elevator in the middle of the yacht. Yes, really, an elevator, on a boat. "What about them?" "Based on your descriptions, I don't think I'm seeing many here." "Yeah." He shoved his hands into the pockets of his khaki linen slacks. I never thought I could appreciate a guy in linen pants, but Sean made them look good somehow, like he was headed to a beach wedding. "Parties aren't really an Atlantean thing, not anymore. We got burned pretty hard in the past for enjoying the finer things of this world. Now you'll find most of us avoid extreme opulence." "Millie doesn't. She definitely enjoys her wealth." "Yeah, that's why she and my mom get along so well. They're not afraid of the world. Most of our race doesn't even live on land anymore." "Where do they live?" "Atlantis." The elevator door opened with a ding. "I thought Atlantis was destroyed. Millie said the city sank to the bottom of the ocean. Are you telling me it still exists? The myths are true?" "Remember the whole breathing underwater thing?" I wanted to quiz him further, but the music grew too loud. Apparently, the 3rd floor was where all the college-aged keepers hung out. The bass was bumping so loud, the doorknob across the hall vibrated to the beat. I pulled it open and saw a sea of bodies moving with the music inside. The lights were dim, with neon flashes of color strobing out above us. Gayla danced clumsily on a platform in the center of the room. Even in her obviously intoxicated state, she was a center of attention, the life of the party. "I think your friend is drunk," I murmured. Sean inhaled deeply. "Ambrosia." Chapter 22. "Ambrosia? For real?" Sean nodded grimly. "Where is it? I want to try some." "No." He furrowed his brows as he shook his head. "First of all, mortal souls can't handle it. There's no way you could survive unless you knew for sure that you had an Atlantean soul. Secondly, that stuff is addictive. It's hard to stop once you get started." "But don't you need it to stay immortal?" "Nope. It just tastes good and feels good. It'll help our bodies recover from major injuries, but that's about it. And a little bit goes a long way." He shook his head again. "I didn't know Gayla had gotten into the stuff." I looked back at the beautiful girl as her white skirt fluttered around her swirling frame. She looked so happy and free. I hated to interrupt her. Sean wasn't bothered, though. He marched right through the crowd up to where Gayla grinned under the flashing lights. Blue and purple reflections glittered off of her platinum hair. Her face brightened when she noticed Sean, and she threw her arms around his neck, almost falling over in the process. I grimaced as she slurred something into his ear. He raised his brows at her words, but quickly shook it off and whispered back into her ear. She nodded, and he pulled her through the crowd back to where I waited near the entrance of the room. "Everly! I'm so glad you came!" I smiled. "Hey, Gayla, your boat is gorgeous." She smiled, but she looked almost embarrassed. "I know, it's kind of ridiculous, but it makes Daddy happy, so—" She shrugged. "Is there somewhere we can chat privately?" Sean asked. Gayla grinned mischievously. "We can go back to my room." "Perfect. Let's go, Ev." Gayla's expression flickered ever so slightly at the mention of my name. She didn't seem jealous, exactly, but she was definitely a little disappointed that I would be accompanying them. It disappeared quickly enough, though. She even seemed to be walking a little straighter by the time we reached her room at the end of the hall. Her bedroom on the boat was nicer than my entire house back in Oklahoma. A sparkling crystal chandelier hung over her four-poster bed. Air whooshed out from under me as I plopped down on her fluffy down bedding. "Do you have the tablet?" Sean asked as the door clicked shut behind him. I nodded and opened the small clutch I held under my arm. The tablet rested safely inside, still just as lifeless as it was when it broke back in the gallery. I hated to think about what kind of life was extinguished when it was dropped that night, but it definitely still held some sort of magic, as evidenced by the way it pieced itself back together. I held the clay rectangle out toward Gayla. "Do you know what this is?" Her eyes widened with excitement. "May I?" I nodded, and she took it into her hands, turning it over and sliding her fingers reverently over its smooth surface. "I've never seen anything like this before, but it's definitely powerful. Where did you get it?" Her mind seemed clearer now that we were away from the party. I glanced at Sean, who gave me an encouraging dip of his chin. "Well, I found it about a week ago. My mother and I were exploring a gallery in the city. This is going to sound crazy, but it almost felt like it was calling to me, like we shared a heartbeat. It glowed blue that night, and its light pulsed along with mine. And that same day my mother went missing. She just disappeared, right from the gallery where I found the tablet. I can't help but think it's all tied together somehow, but I don't know what it says. Can you read it?" "Incredible," she whispered. "Well, it's obviously got some kind of connection to you. I don't recognize the language, though." Is there any way you can, incite a vision or something and see what it means?" Sean shifted on his feet, just as anxious to get some answers as I was. Gayla shook her head. "Visions don't work that way. They're more like dreams. I can't control when they come, and their meaning isn't always clear. I can try to get a sense of the object's history, but I doubt it'll tell me anything about what it says. And truth be told, I'm not a very skilled seer yet, even without all this ambrosia pulsing through my veins." She giggled nervously. "That's okay. I'd love for you to try, if you don't mind." "I'll try." She filled her lungs with air and closed her eyes, placing the tablet flat between her palms. She stayed that way for a minute, maybe longer before I noticed the muscles in her face twitching. It started slowly, a flick of her lip here, a twitch of her brow there. But after another minute, her face was twisting into a painful-looking grimace. Then her eyes abruptly opened and everything was calm again. Gayla laughed, the musical tinkle of her voice made even more endearing as it ended in a tiny snort. "Sorry, guys, I tried, but all I can see is my trainer from the city." "What does that mean?" "Well, he was scowling, so it probably means my subconscious is feeling guilty about partying instead of focusing on my studies as he instructed me. But this is my last weekend of freedom, you know. Next week it'll be all training and studying, non-stop, all the time." She set the tablet back on the bed, and we all stared down at it. But it remained lifeless, taunting me with its dull exterior and mysterious carvings. "What are you?" "Where will you be starting school?" I asked, trying to change the subject and shake off my disappointment. "Columbia." She said it as though it was obvious. Sean pursed his lips from the other side of the room. I probably should have known that. Did all the keepers attend Columbia? "Right, of course. Guess the ambrosia's getting to me too," I giggled, trying to appear more relaxed, like Gayla. Sean cringed. "Is your trainer one of the professors, then?" "No, he's not associated with the university. He only lives in the city so he can meet with the Olympian leaders. He's on the king's council, but he's not very well known. I think the king likes to keep him a secret so he can have all of his visions for himself." I laughed again, but Gayla tilted her head in confusion. Oh, she wasn't joking. "So is that your lot as well? Will you go on to work for the king after you finish school?" I asked. If so, I could understand why she was trying to live up her last weekend of freedom. She was about to become a modern-day slave, in a sense. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe. I'll definitely go into leadership, because that's all we seers are good for. But I don't know if the king will want me directly. It's rare that a seer can become as skilled as Russell, even if I do get to train directly under him." Chapter 23. "Did you say Russell?" "Yeah, why? Like white man bun works in a gallery, Russell?" Gayla giggled. "Russell's not hot enough for you to call it a man bun." I locked my wide eyes onto Sean's and turned back to Gayla. "Is he here? At the party?" "Probably." Her amusement was turning into more of a curiosity. "What about him?" "I knew I saw him." I grinned victoriously at Sean. "Come on." I stood abruptly and moved toward the door. "Wait!" Gayla stood, only slightly unsteady on her feet now. Evidently, the effects of ambrosia wore off fairly quickly. "What do you want with Russell?" I hesitated. What would she say if I told her the tablet belonged to him? Would she report my theft? After all, I'd only just met her that afternoon. Surely she was more loyal to Russell than me. I bit my lip as a plan formed loosely in my mind. I'd tell her the truth, even if it was only a partial truth. "I saw Russell there at the gallery. He was the last person who spoke to my mom before she disappeared. They might have even left together. He will know where she is." Gayla's forehead wrinkled, as she tried to make sense of my words. "What would Russell want with your mom?" I shrugged. "I think they might have known each other. He called her by her nickname, Tilly." I frowned, remembering that day and the fear I'd felt when my mom left. She just walked away with him. He had to be responsible somehow. She was upset about his painting. She chewed him out pretty good, but she wasn't angry anymore when they disappeared. "What was the painting of?" I looked at Sean, unsure if I should answer her. He shifted uncomfortably on his feet, but nodded for me to go ahead. Her big brown eyes were full of curiosity as I turned back to answer her. "It was a portrait of me." "You?" Gayla nodded silently. She opened her mouth, then shut it again with a slight shake of her head. Then she started pacing. "What's wrong?" I asked. "What does that mean?" "Tell me more about the painting." Sean shrugged. He had just as little idea of what she was thinking as I did. "Well, I say it was me, but it wasn't exactly. The girl in the painting was missing my scar." I pointed to my chin. She was fierce, determined. She wore a gorgeous gown and sat on a throne in a room I've never seen before. The painting was titled Deliverance. Gayla stopped and rubbed her head. "Fascinating." I wanted to ask more about what it might mean, but the door to her bedroom slammed open before I could form the words on my tongue. Dom stepped inside, sneering in my direction. "Stop," she shouted. "Whatever they're trying to get out of you, it's all under false pretenses." She looked pointedly at Gayla. "Sean's friend is not a keeper. She's a human." Gayla glanced in my direction, but she didn't look shocked or even angry. Her dark eyes glittered with even more curiosity. "Are you sure?" she asked after a moment. Dom put her hands on her hips, brows raised as she waited for me to admit the truth. I shook my head. "Maybe. I don't know." I walked back to her bed and sat with another whoosh of air. A single feather shot out of the seam of her duvet and floated lazily to the ground. "I don't know what I am." Sean finally spoke up, moving away from the wall to close the door behind Dom, and the distant sound of music from the party faded into near silence again. "She was raised as a human. She only just learned of our world last week." This information did surprise Gayla. Her mouth fell open, and she turned to Dom for confirmation. Dom narrowed her eyes at Sean, reading his mind, no doubt, then nodded. I dropped my face into my hands, disappointed or ashamed, I wasn't sure. I just knew I didn't belong with them. This wasn't my world. And now that I had been identified as an imposter, there was no way Gayla was going to help me out anymore. The bed sank beside me, and a thin arm wrapped around my back. "It's okay. Let's start at the beginning." I looked up to see Gayla's concerned eyes, then turned to the others. Sean looked apologetic, but this wasn't his fault. Dom was going to discover the truth either way, so there was no use trying to hide it anymore. They moved in, forming a half circle around me, each one watching with anticipation. "Sean's right. Until my mom disappeared last week, I didn't know it was possible that I could be anything but human, but my Aunt Millie has filled me in on a few things since then." "Millie Gordon?" Gayla asked. I nodded. "She explained that we are Atlantean. My mother was raised in this world, but she left when she became pregnant with me and hid for many years. The identity of my father is unknown." "So you're not human. Your mother is a keeper, but—" "I could be fractured," I sighed. "There's a hunter already after me." "But we don't know for sure," Sean added. "Her father may have been Atlantean too. As of now, Everly has no powers, but that doesn't mean she never will." We all sat silently for a moment. Surprisingly, it was Dom who spoke next. "You're worried that your mother bonded with a mortal, and that she may be in trouble." Yes. It wasn't a question, really, but I confirmed what she gathered from my mind. It felt good to admit the truth aloud, despite the weight it held. Well, you don't need to worry about that. You're not immortal, or not a pure mortal anyway. Gayla made the statement with so much confidence, it was difficult not to trust her implicitly. Did you have a vision? Dom asked. Have you seen her powers? No, Gayla shook her head. But Russell did. What? All three of us turned to Gayla with similar looks of confusion. Dom's features pulled together suddenly with concentration, but Gayla waved her off. She apparently didn't like her friend rooting around in her brain either. When Russell first began working for King Barius in the 1400s, he had some difficulty describing his visions to the king in a meaningful way. The king didn't trust Russell's interpretations. He wanted to see the visions for himself, so he asked Russell to paint what he saw. The king would examine the paintings and draw his own conclusions. Eventually, he learned to trust his seer, but the habit of painting his visions had become therapeutic for Russell. It's something he still does today. So you're saying the painting of Everly is the image of a vision Russell had? Gayla nodded. No. I rose to my feet again. The girl in the painting wasn't me, remember? No scar. That's just it, Everly. The fact that you had no scar in the painting is proof that you're immortal, or at least demi-immortal. Demi-immortal. I liked that. It made me sound like Hercules instead of just some poor fractured soul. I appreciated Gayla's thoughts, but it still didn't make sense. Dom, knowing my hesitation, explained further. Keeper blood is different from human blood. We heal more quickly, more thoroughly, but it doesn't happen until your powers are activated. As kids, we all fell down and scraped our knees. Most of us had scars and broken bones, just like human children. But once we mature and receive our powers, the cleansing and healing power of Keeper blood restores us to perfect form. And your scars disappear? Gayla nodded. So it had to have been you in the painting, but the Keeper version of you. I shook my head again. No, we still don't know for certain. I'm 18 and still have no powers. Zero, zilch, nothing. And the way my mom became so angry, I have another theory. I think perhaps I have a twin out there and the painting is of her. Maybe she got the full Keeper soul and I got left with the mortal leftovers. Sean rolled his eyes. Not the twin thing again. Gayla shrugged. Could be, but don't count yourself out. We don't have to theorize for long. I strode to the door and grabbed the handle. Luckily for us, the answer is right here on this boat. We just have to find Russell. Chapter 24. We spilled out into the hallway, and Gayla grabbed the door frame for balance before moving forward. You okay? Dom asked, her brows pinched together as she examined her friend. Yeah, I'll be fine. Gayla looked with longing back toward the main entertainment. The bass thumped through the hallway, reminding me that there were still hundreds of people on this boat who were completely oblivious to the stress pounding through my veins. Sean reached out and touched her shoulder. Don't, Gayla. Her cheeks flushed as she met his eyes. Then she glanced down to the floor, hiding behind her long lashes. I'm good, she said louder. Let's get downstairs. Dom locked an arm through Gayla's, and the girls moved forward toward the elevator. What was that all about? I whispered to Sean. The ambrosia. It wears off just as fast as it kicks in, leaving your body thirsty for more. She's fighting through a strong craving right now. We stepped into the elevator, and Dom pushed the 2 button. Beside her, Gayla held her stomach, looking a little queasy, as the elevator dropped and landed on the 2nd floor. This way. She was the first one out the door. I followed her out into a small bar area, mostly empty, with doors propped wide open to a large deck. Dozens of adults stood out in the open air, sipping cocktails, or maybe it was ambrosia given the company, and enjoying music coming through the speakers. It was less glitzy than the downstairs scene, but way more tame than the raucous college kids upstairs. "Do you see him?" I asked no one in particular. "Not yet," Gayla answered. "Let's go out on the deck." We moved forward, each of us scanning the crowd as we went. The other three crossed straight over to the edge of the boat, grabbing a hold of the railing as they looked both directions down the sides. I stayed back. I wasn't eager to get any nearer to the water than I had to. I turned back to the crowd and almost plowed right into the best-smelling man I'd ever encountered. His cologne must have been made from concentrated pheromones with a hefty dash of aphrodisiac. And leather. Whatever it was divine. I was all giggly before I even brought my line of sight up to his strong eyes, which were a deep mossy green with flecks of gold. "Clayton Miles," he grinned, flashing a broad smile of teeth that could have been carved from literal pearls. "I don't believe we've met." I giggled again, like an idiot. Clayton freaking Miles was standing right in front of me, and he looked even better in person than he did on all those red carpet pre-shows I like to watch. Everly! I looked over in time to see Dom's platinum blonde hair blowing over her shoulder as she stomped toward me. "Yeah, that's it. I'm Everly," I said, turning back to the movie star standing in front of me. "Well, Everly, consider me charmed." He lifted my hand and kissed the back of my knuckles. Clayton Miles kissed me. Dom's cold hand wrapped around my bicep and pulled me out of my reverie. "Snap out of it." She yanked me along behind her, weaving us in and out of small groups on the deck. "He had you hook, line, and sinker. You gotta stay focused." "How do you guys handle it?" I asked. "Handle what?" "Their charm, or glamour, or sway, or whatever you want to call it. He's a siren, right?" "He is, and I don't know. Maybe it comes with your powers?" "You don't know?" I stopped and looked at the gorgeous girl across from me. "Do you mean to tell me you've never been swayed by one of those guys?" She raised a shoulder. "I don't think they've ever tried." "Or maybe they just know you'd see them coming. You probably know what they're going to try before they do." Dom laughed, and for the first time, I wasn't intimidated by her. If there was any chance at all that Gayla was right, and I did eventually grow into some powers, I might even like to call these girls my friends. And with my mom gone, I could definitely use a friend or two. "There," she said suddenly. I followed her gaze to a tall, thin man. He wore an all-black suit, which must have been incredibly hot on this sticky late summer evening, but somehow the sight of him still sent a cold shiver down my spine. His hair was pulled back into a ball high on the crown of his head, and his eyes were like pure darkness in the low light of the deck. "Russell." I practically growled his name as I made my way over to the shadowy corner where he stood. A shorter man with round, pink cheeks stepped away when he saw us coming, but Russell didn't move a muscle. He just stared at me with those dead-looking eyes of his. "What a coincidence bumping into you here." "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" Russell responded flatly. "Yes, I'm Tilly Gordon's daughter." There, that should get his wheels turning. Only it didn't. He remained completely expressionless. I swallowed down the panic notching its way up into my throat and glanced over at Dom. She was completely zeroed in on the man, her stare so intense that she didn't seem to notice me at all. And he ignored her completely. Russell glanced impatiently at his watch. "You're Russell, right? The seer?" He blinked in my direction but said nothing. I continued anyway. I knew it was him. I'd recognize that vacant stare anywhere. Seems like it might be hard for you to forget a face like mine, seeing as how you painted it on a 4-foot-tall canvas." He blinked again, then looked over my shoulder. "Is there any security on this boat?" he muttered to himself. "Russell and Jude, your little gallery in the city. My portrait is there. You painted it, and then you disappeared with my mother, and I will not leave you alone until I have some answers. Where is she?" His face continued to show zero emotion. I wasn't sure if he was even capable of feeling anything at all. My panic was nearly choking me now as I looked desperately to Dom. "Help me out here. Can you see it in his mind?" Dom shook her head, looking a little panicked herself. "No, I think we're done here." Russell rolled his eyes and pushed through us back toward the crowd. By the time I turned around, he was completely out of sight again. "What was that?" I asked Dom. "I don't know. His mind was blank, or blocked off from me anyway. I couldn't see a single thing." "That was Russell, though, right?" I was beginning to doubt myself. "It definitely was." Dom shook her head with disbelief. "That's never happened to me before." "Well, it seems he's pretty good at introducing new and completely bewildering events into people's lives." Gayla and Sean approached us then. "Any luck?" Sean asked, but with one look at her friend, Gayla knew. "You found him, didn't you? What happened?" Dom looked at me to explain. "You can tell them," I said with a wave of my hand. "I think I need some air." Sean eyed me but didn't follow, thank goodness. I just needed to think this through for a second. I darted through the people across the deck, keeping my eyes peeled for Russell again, just in case. It was useless. He was long gone. I paused in front of the doors, wondering if I should sneak back up to Gayla's room for some quiet, or if it would be better to search for somewhere to sit out here. I stepped toward the elevator when I felt a familiar tingle crawl its way up my spine. I looked around for the golden eyes that usually came with that feeling, and spotted 2 of the Miles brothers just inside near the Bay Area. Clayton looked up with a wink. I hadn't noticed a tingle earlier with him, but there was no denying it now. It must have been a siren thing, and I wasn't about to get myself tangled up in one of those traps again. I turned instead, moving toward the edge of the boat. There was a clear area curving away from the cabin up ahead, but the walkway between the walls and the edge of the boat was narrow. "There's a rail," I tried to calm myself. "I'll be fine." I scampered over to the open air, keeping my eyes on the wooden floor instead of peeking over the edge of the rails into the dark water below. Not only was I afraid of heights, but the water. Nope, not letting my mind go there right now. I crept along the walkway, keeping my body as close to the wall as possible, desperate to get that persistent tingle off my skin. The Miles brothers were completely out of sight. Everyone was now, but the feeling just wouldn't go away. Finally satisfied with my distance from the crowd, I slunk to the ground, careful to keep my dress in place, and I'd just barely gotten comfortable when I realized I wasn't alone. Chapter 25. A snowy white owl sat perched on the rail across from me. It looked identical to the one I saw with my mother outside of the gallery in the city. "Hey, little fella, did you come here with Russell?" The owl blinked, but otherwise didn't move a muscle. "Yeah, that's how he responded to me, too," I groaned, and pulled my clutch into my lap. The tablet still rested safely inside. I pulled it out and examined it again, tracing over the worn symbols etched into its smooth surface. Did I dare to show it to Russell? I could march right up to him and wave it proudly in his face, see how he liked that. There was no doubt it was valuable, and according to Gayla, a powerful piece. He wouldn't be able to brush me off so quickly then. He could have me arrested for theft, though. "What are you?" I whispered to it. Of course it didn't answer. It sat cold and still in my hands. Strange as it sounded, I almost wished it would come alive again. I wished its pulse would beat with my own. It was more than a clay tablet, it had to be, and I felt lonely knowing what it could be and seeing it without the life I knew it contained inside. The owl shuffled on the railing, and the buzzy tingle across my skin became more prominent. I put the tablet back into my bag and ran my hands up and down my arms, trying to bring a normal feeling back into them. A quick look around at my surroundings confirmed I was still alone. Well, alone except for the owl, anyway. I inched toward it. "You're not the one making me feel like this, are you?" The owl turned its head at an unnatural angle in response. The tingle spread further, up my shoulders and across the back of my neck. It was electric, very noticeable, but not uncomfortable. It was almost pleasant, actually. "Well, did it answer you?" The baritone voice caught me off guard. I might have jumped at the sound, but it was so soothing I couldn't move. I froze, looking into the owl's eyes for the reflection of the man I knew stood behind me. Finally, I got my wits about me enough to turn around and face him. I knew what I would find, but seeing Tate in person again sent my heart bouncing wildly in my chest. My body was screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. They couldn't, because somehow Tate managed to send a feeling of exhilaration through me as well, and my limbs were too confused to do anything but stay right where they were. He was the deadliest kind of predator, a man who made his prey feel excited about the hunt, even knowing how it all would end, but I wouldn't let it end tonight. No, I finally willed myself to take a step backward. Owls can't talk. Not even to you. He raised one perfect dark brow. The lights from the marina glittered off of his golden irises, creating an even more ethereal quality about him. I wondered how much of it he was generating through his glamour, and how much of it was just naturally Tate. My goodness, he was beautiful. Especially not to me. Or did you forget how utterly powerless I am as a mortal? A smirk played at the corner of his perfect mouth as he considered that. Mortal for now, but I expect that to change any day now. Perhaps you just need some kind of an emotional charge to get that fractured soul of yours ignited. He stepped toward me, his movements lithe and effortless. He seemed to glide across the deck. His grace was made even more apparent by my stumbling awkwardly away from him. I wouldn't let him touch me again. I seemed to lose all control over myself when he touched me. "Get back," I said. The shakiness in my voice revealed just how afraid I really was, but of course he didn't listen. My back hit the cool metal bar of the railing, and my chest tightened. I was less than a foot away from the edge of the boat. "In case you didn't notice, I was hoping to be alone here." "Oh, I noticed. I've been waiting to get you alone all night." "Where did you come from, anyway?" "Up there." He lifted his eyes to a deck on the floor above us. There was only one way he could have gotten down from that high, and I knew for certain a mortal wouldn't have survived the jump. "How long were you watching me?" "Long enough to get bored. That tablet obviously isn't doing anything for you, so like I said, I think it's time to take matters into my own hands and see if we can't get these powers started up for you." He was practically touching me now, and my body buzzed all over. This glamour of his was unlike any other power I'd encountered among the keepers so far, even greater than the Miles brothers. The way my body reacted to him was unnerving at best. I couldn't back up any further, so I stepped sideways instead, moving along the edge of the boat. I kept one hand on the rail at all times. I knew what lay on the other side, and I wasn't feeling up to a cold bath in the bay tonight. Tate stepped with me, never allowing more than a foot of space between us. With every step, my fear twisted closer to frustration. Tate admitted he couldn't do anything to me without proof of a fractured soul, and there was no proof. I might not even be fractured. This was getting ridiculous. "That's kind of you to offer, but you can keep your hands off of me, thank you very much." My frustration won out. To my complete surprise, he stopped. He lifted both hands in the air. "Okay." "Okay?" There was something fishy about this. Predators didn't just stop mid-hunt without a good reason. He was up to something, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. "Yep, if you say you want me to leave you alone, I will, even if that's not the impression I get from the way your heart races when I'm near." "Maybe that's my body's way of telling me to run." "And the flush in your cheeks." He lifted a hand, but left his fingers hovering in the air an inch from my face, never actually bringing them to touch me. "Anger." "Okay. But how do you explain the way your breath hitches when I lean in close?" He leaned down so near, I could feel his breath fluttering the hair on top of my head as he whispered. And dang it, he was right. I released the breath caught in my throat as a realization dawned on me. He laughed softly, but it sounded more like a purr. I stood another step back. "You think you're clever, huh?" "I do." There was amusement in his voice. He was getting way too much enjoyment out of this ordeal. "Well, unfortunately, you've missed the main point. I have no powers. None. You're wasting your time. But I'm sure there are hundreds of fractured souls waiting for you back in the city." But it's so noisy there. I much prefer the good company I have here on the water." He winked, and my stomach did a little flip. "Shake it off." Dom's words from earlier echoed in my ears. I had to stay focused. "How'd you know I was here anyway?" "I have eyes everywhere." It was those Miles brothers, wasn't it? I cursed under my breath. I knew they were too pretty to be trusted. "There are lots of keepers who can't be trusted." He stepped forward again. "Yeah, no kidding. I'm looking at the worst one of all." "I don't think you understand." Tate smiled, and I had to bite the inside of my lip to keep from returning it. This thrill he gave me was such an unfair advantage. "I won't let anything hurt you." "Nothing except you?" "Oh, darling, it's quite the opposite. My job is made easier when I make the process enjoyable." "You're sick, you know that?" I stepped back again, and my hand slipped off the railing. Tate thrust his arms out toward me, and instinctively I moved away again. That was a mistake. My heel rocked off the edge of the boat, and I saw the darkness of night dotted with stars like a life-sized canvas of the sky as I fell backward. The air rushed past, and all I could think about was how lucky I was to have such a glorious sight as my last. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. A descendant of Atlantis, drowning. It looked like Tate was going to end up with my soul after all. Finally, I hit the water with more force than was expected. The wind was knocked out of my lungs from the impact, and pain shot through my limbs as I slapped against the water. There was probably a splash, but I never saw it. I don't know which chilled me more, the coldness of the ocean or the complete void of light as I was engulfed on my way down. As my final act in this world, I tucked my clutch with the tablet inside the top of my dress, under the front of a strap. At least it would be found with my body when they searched the bay the next morning, and maybe Sean and Millie could help save my mother. Maybe it would even be easier with me gone. Chapter 26. Dying was nothing like I'd expected it to be. I never saw my life flash before my eyes. I didn't watch myself drown through an out-of-body experience. There was no bright light. It was nothing like in the movies. It's not that I thought dying would be an enjoyable experience necessarily. I just didn't expect it to be so hard. My arms and legs kicked and flailed wildly, But it was so dark I didn't know which way was up. Even if I had been able to swim, I don't think I would have known which way to go. But I fought nonetheless. My lungs began to burn, the need to inhale a gulp of fresh air all-consuming. Something slippery fluttered against my bare leg, and then I felt the warmth. It started in my chest, replacing the fire under my sternum with a sense of calm. It spread through my torso and down into my legs. It danced across my shoulder blades and into my arms until even the tips of my fingers felt alive and sparkling with energy. Then I was jerked upward. I opened my eyes, ignoring the sting of salt and the murkiness clouding my vision. All I could see was the glow. He looked like an angel, strong and powerful. He swam through the water with ease, pulling me ever upward toward the sky. Was this the end? Was I finally crossing over to be with my Maker? The air was warm when my head finally emerged from the dark depths of the bay. I gasped, spitting water, as my lungs greedily gorged themselves on oxygen. My arms and legs hung limp by my sides, yet I didn't sink. Someone held me from behind, one strong arm wrapped around my waist, while his legs tread water as easily as he might hum a song. My angel. I turned to look over my shoulder to thank him. My nose brushed against a scruffy cheek, and I pulled back enough to make out the shadowy silhouette of strong, high cheekbones and a well-defined jawline. Tate. My voice was gravelly from seawater, still clinging to the edges of my throat. At your service. I tried to get away, but he pulled me tighter, closer to the hard plane of his abs, and I hated how aware of his body I suddenly became. Calm down, he whispered, the air from his words tickling the air against my ear. Are you trying to die? No, I'm trying to survive, which is exactly why I need to get away from you. I placed a foot on the front of his thigh and kicked off hard, trying to propel myself forward. It didn't work. Tate spun me around and scooped me into his arms like a toddler, wrapping my legs around his waist and holding on to me with both arms wrapped securely behind my back. He kept us above water with his legs alone treading water, and the gentle motion of the waves was calming. Or was it the movement of Tate's strong body against mine? I was unnaturally at ease given the circumstances. Are you glamoring me? He laughed, the sound warm from deep in his chest. I've got to keep you calm somehow. If you keep flailing around like that, you'll drag us both under. Why did you jump in after me anyway? I thought you wanted me dead so you could steal my soul. I don't want you dead. In fact, I need you alive to extract your soul. If you die, it disappears. And after you extract it? Well, he tilted his head to the side. Then you die. But it won't hurt, I promise. I placed both hands on his chest and shoved myself backward, but he only held on tighter. You seriously need to stop that. You're drawing attention. I looked over his shoulder at the crowd gathering along the edge of the boat. They looked concerned and perplexed. So much for pretending I was like them. My mortality was on full display, like a neon light with a bright flashing arrow pointing down that read, "Not Atlantean." The idea that a descendant of Atlantis would need to be rescued from drowning was preposterous. And by Tate, of all people. Then again, this wasn't the first time Tate had appeared after a near-death experience. You know, I said, it's funny how disaster always seems to strike when you're around. First, the bomb at the gallery, then I almost drowned. How are you going to make an attempt on my life next time, Golden Eyes? He smirked. I told you, I'm not trying to kill you. So you had nothing to do with the bomb? I didn't say that. Well, you're going to have to explain how blowing up the gallery I was in and pushing me over the edge of a 3-story yacht is your way of not trying to kill me. First of all, I didn't push you. That was all you and your natural grace. I tried to grab you before you fell, but I'll be honest, I don't care much for your life. All I care about is getting your soul in one piece." A growl started deep in my chest, and my mouth parted to yell at him. Tate held up a finger, and I felt compelled to remain silent, at least until he was finished. "But," he said, continuing with a smirk, "I need to coax your powers out first, no matter how fractured they may be. I just need proof. A few more shocking incidents, or attempts on your life, as you say, should do the trick." "Well, why wait?" I struggled to keep my volume at a reasonable level. He knew exactly how to get under my skin, and whatever glamour he was using to keep me calm earlier had vanished now. "You've literally got me in the palm of your hands. You know I can't swim. Drop me, let me sink. You'll see once again that I have no powers, and all those people standing at the rail will be happy to lock you up like the scum that you are." "Such harsh words," he tisked. "Besides, I don't like an audience." "Ha! You know I'm starting to believe you can't actually do anything you say you will. I have no powers. And as a mortal, I don't have to be afraid of you. You can't hurt me without ruining your own life. And both of your attempts to coax out my non-existent powers so far have failed. I think you're just a lot of talk." I didn't know why I felt the urge to goad him. He just made me so angry. And I might have been physically powerless against him, but I wanted him to know he didn't have the upper hand. I really didn't have to be afraid of him. Not yet, anyway. Not until I knew for sure whether or not I was fractured. "I'm just a lot of talk, huh?" He quirked a dark eyebrow. I nodded. "You can't do anything to me." My voice was softer now, almost husky-sounding from the salt water. He pulled me closer, a feat I didn't know was possible with how much we already touched under the water. He leaned in, his lips brushing against my ear as he whispered, "I can't make you do anything you don't want to do, you're right. But I don't think you know what you want." My stomach flipped, and I felt my heart pulsing, its strong, pounding rhythm betraying my cool exterior. Tate noticed. He had to have noticed. My skin buzzed with anticipation. He released one arm from my waist and brought his hand to my face, using the soft pad of his thumb to wipe a spot under my left eye. "Your makeup is running." "Oh." It was all I could manage. My words disappeared, stifled by the lump in my throat. What brought about this change? Why the shift in his demeanor? His gaze lingered on my eye. It happened frequently. People often couldn't help but stare at the stark contrast of blue and the giant slice of brown in my iris. But most people didn't look like Tate, and the expression on his face almost seemed to have a hint of longing. He shook his head. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Your eyes are just so striking. I don't mean to stare, but you really are enchanting. I might be all talk, but I meant that at the gallery, and I mean it now. You're quite fun to admire." We had just about reached the ladder that would take us back up to the deck of Gala's boat. He leaned back with a thrust of his legs to propel us toward the ladder. Then he took hold with his free hand, the other still holding me snugly against him. "You're not so bad yourself." I felt braver now that we were so close to safety again. Just another minute, and my feet would be back on solid ground. Though, strangely, I wasn't in a hurry to get out of Tate's arms. He leaned down until our foreheads were touching, and everything else disappeared from my sight. I didn't care who might have been watching from the deck above. I didn't care about anything but hearing whatever it was Tate said next. "I'm glad you're safe." "Me too. Thank you for rescuing me." "Would it be all right if I—" His eyes flashed down to my lips, and my breath caught in my throat. "Yes." I barely whispered my response as I tilted my head up to meet his lips. I paused for just a moment, exposed in the cool evening air, waiting to kiss my hero, my rescuer, my angel, but his lips never came. I opened my eyes and found Tate grinning mischievously down at me. "You might be careful next time you want to trash-talk my powers. I always get what I want." I scowled. I'd been glamored again. I was such a fool. Reaching over his shoulder, I took hold of the bottom rung of the ladder and pulled myself up and out of his arms. Then, just for good measure, I turned back to face Tate. "I hate you," I grumbled. With my left hand on top of his head, I shoved with all my weight, pushing his beautiful face under the water. Then I made my way up toward the deck, never turning to look back at him. It might have been childish, but boy, it felt good. Chapter 27. Sean, Dom, and Gayla all waited for me at the top of the ladder. Sean reached out to help me back onto the boat, casting a wary glance over my shoulder at Tate below. "I'm so sorry," he mumbled. "I really had no idea he was here." "I know. It's fine. I'm fine." Dom shot me a knowing look, but thankfully she kept her mouth shut. I was already mortified by what had transpired with Tate. I didn't want to relive it now or ever. "Do you still have the tablet?" Gayla whispered. "Dom told us everything that happened with Russell. I can't believe he would do that to you. But don't worry, he can't play dumb with me." "I do." I pulled my clutch from its spot, still tucked safely under the strap of my dress. A steady stream of water dripped from the corner as I extended my arm toward her. She didn't hesitate to take it and tuck it under her own arm, probably ruining the very expensive dress she wore. "I'll keep it safe while you get dried off." She glanced nervously behind me, which meant Tate had finally made it aboard. I turned to see him grinning deviously as he passed me on his way toward the Miles brothers. He gave his head a little shake, sending water droplets flying towards me, and when he stopped, his hair was perfectly tasseled, like the model of a surfboard ad campaign. "Oh, he is hot." Gayla stared open-mouthed as Tate passed us by. "Yeah, it's too bad he only wants me for my soul." Dom frowned. "Come on, let's get you back upstairs. I'm sure Gayla has something you can change into." Sean stepped by my side as we moved through the crowd. He turned his body in an attempt to shield me somewhat from the onlookers, but I knew they were staring. I was sure I'd made quite a spectacle of myself. Gayla's dad would probably never let me on his yacht again, and honestly, I was okay with that. "First things first, when we get back to the city, we're getting you a YMCA membership," he said. "Why?" "Because you need swim lessons." Gayla chimed in. "I've never known an Atlantean who couldn't swim. I thought it just came naturally to you all." I shrugged. Maybe it did. Maybe Tate was right, and I wasn't Atlantean. But I wouldn't let my mind go there now. "I'm beginning to think nothing comes naturally for me." Gayla frowned. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that." "I know, it's just been a long day." We reached the elevator inside the small bar area and waited patiently for the doors to open. All was silent except for the drip, drip, drip of salt water from the tattered hem of my dress. "Well, I've decided I want to help. There are just too many weird things surrounding you and this tablet for me to ignore. My curiosity has gotten the best of me, I guess." "Me too," Dom said, as we all stepped onto the elevator. "I understand better now where you're coming from, and what happened to your mom isn't right. We'll help you find her." "Really?" The elevator closed behind me. "Really," Gayla said. "First thing tomorrow, I'm going to look for a bigger apartment in the city. I don't know where you were planning to stay before, but you can move in with Dom and me. We'll get a spot really close to campus." "Oh, well, Nope." Gayla shook her head. "It's all on me, really. You're going to need some extra friends to help keep you safe from that sexy golden-eyed devil, and I wouldn't dare trust anyone else." I laughed as the reality hit me. Gayla wanted to get closer to Tate. I wouldn't argue with her tonight. She seemed pretty set on the idea, but unless she wanted to live near NYU and take a cab to Columbia each day, she was sadly mistaken on my roommate situation. I felt Dom's dark eyes on me as the elevator opened again on the 3rd floor. A party continued to rage on beyond the doors in front of us, and Gayla paused for a moment, still fighting her cravings, most likely, before moving toward her room. I gave Dom a quiet shake of my head. It was going to take a while to get used to this whole mind-reading thing. Dom seemed to understand, and she didn't say anything about NYU or apartments or anything else. Sean agreed to keep guard outside the door as Gayla dragged me into her oversized closet in search of something dry to wear. Within minutes, I emerged in some of Gayla's workout gear. My makeup was a mess, and my hair hung in straggly wet lines around me. I didn't want to get dressed up again. I'd had enough partying for the night. Some comfy running shorts and a baggy racerback were all I needed. "I'll call you when we get to the city on Monday. We can all go apartment hunting together." Dom winked at me as Gayla continued gabbing on about showing me her favorite coffee shops and boutiques near campus. Dom was much more fun as a co-conspirator than she had been as my enemy earlier in the day. We continued forward, me barefoot with Millie's wet heels tucked under my arm. It was a wonder they hadn't gotten lost in the bay. "Ready?" I asked, as we joined up with Sean again at the elevator. He waited patiently, holding my still damp clutch and the tablet inside. "Yep, let's get out of here." "Thank you again for coming tonight." Gayla wrapped her arms around me, then turned and did the same to Sean, adding a kiss on the cheek for him. He shoved his hands into his pockets and looked at the ground when she pulled away, redness creeping obviously up into his fair-skinned cheeks. Gayla just smiled. "Things always did get more exciting when we were together," she said. He looked up, and some unspoken understanding passed between the two of them. I looked to Dom, who just raised her brows and shook her head in response. "Well, okay then." "You really can stay if you want," I said to him as the elevator door shut and we began our descent to the bottom floor. "I'm sure Gayla would be pleased if you did." He shot me a disapproving look. "Nah, the party scene isn't really my thing." "Understood," I agreed. It wasn't my scene either, and selfishly, I was glad Sean offered to drive me home. I'd never had to call an Uber before, and the stories from the girls back home made me nervous. Just a little, though. I knew now that there were worse monsters in New York than rogue Uber drivers. All eyes were on me in my workout gear and bare feet as we made our way back through the glitzy ballroom on the 1st floor of the yacht. The pianist still poured his soul into the melodies coming from the corner, and I'd never stood out so much in my life. But I didn't care. My eyes scanned the room for Tate. There was no tingle, no buzz, and no sign of those charming golden eyes anywhere. I didn't even see the Miles brothers anymore. Perhaps they'd all gone home or found some other celebrity party. Good. We were better off without them. Sean paused before we left the cabin, gesturing toward the bathroom door. "Are you good here for just a sec?" "Yeah, of course." He handed me the clutch, and I smoothed out my hot pink shorts, trying my best to look inconspicuous as I swayed to the classical music. A hand on my arm startled me so much I almost dropped my bag and the tablet. I looked up to find Rossel's pitch-black gaze glued to the clutch in my hand. He knew, but he didn't reach for it. After a moment, he moved his dark stare up to meet my own. "Are you leaving?" he asked. His voice was cold and flat. "Yes." I tucked the clutch back under my arm, certain now that he wasn't after it. maybe it was useless to him now that the life was gone from it. Good. Don't come back. He certainly didn't have to worry about that. I'd had quite enough of this boat. I won't. And stay away from Gala. That one I couldn't agree to. Why? I don't want her getting too attached to you. He frowned. What is that supposed to mean? I think you know. He was wrong. I had no clue what he was talking about, but I didn't like the tone of his voice. The bathroom door swung open again beside us. Everly? Sean stepped out, patting his hands dry on his pants. Was that Rossel? I turned back to find my white-haired friend missing again. It was amazing how quickly that man could disappear. It was. Are you okay? What did he want? Sean snapped his eyes to the clutch under my arm, relief apparent in his eyes once he saw it was safe. Nothing, I said. Let's get home. We've got a mystery to solve. This has been Fractured Soul, Daughter of Sea and Sky, Book 1, Part 2.